Assalamualaikum and good evening to Ms. Iman. Today our group will present two important topics, which is federal-state constitutional relationship and contract admission. First, background of the case study. Malaysia practices a federal system of government under the federal constitution, which divide powers between the federal and state governments. The federal government is responsible for national matters such as finance and infrastructure, while state governments manage land administration and local planning. In construction industry, both levels of government work together in project approval, land matters and contract admission. Understanding this relationship is important to ensure legal compliance and the successful delivery of construction projects.
Now, moving to the problem statement. So the main issue is that although the federal constitution clearly divides the power between the federal and state government, challenges still exist in practice. For example, poor coordination and overlapping responsibilities can cause confusion and delays. In the construction industry, projects require approvals from both federal and state authorities. Delays in approval or differences in state procedure also can affect the project schedule, increase costs and also lead to contract disputes. Now, moving to the objective of the report. So basically there are three objectives, which is the first one is to examine the federal construction of Malaysia and its role in defining the relationship between the federal government and the state government. The second one is to identify the division of powers and the responsibilities between both of the federal and state government under the federal constitution. And the last one is to analyse the impact of federal-state constitutional relation on governance and the contract administration in the Malaysian construction industry.
Okay, next we continue to the literature review for Federal Constitution of Malaysia. The Supreme Law of Malaysia, effective on 31st August 1957, provide the legal framework for the country's governance and administration, defines the power and responsibilities of the federal government, state government, executive, legislative and judicial branches. Lastly, it protects citizens' rights and liberties. We move on to the next definition of the Federal Constitution. The highest legal authority in Malaysia, forms the basis of Malaysia's constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy. Next, all laws enacted by Parliament and state legislatures must comply with the Constitution. Next, significance of the Federal Constitution upholds rules of law, protects fundamental rights and freedoms, ensures separation of powers among government branches. Constitutional Supremacy Article 4.1. The Federal Constitution is the highest law in Malaysia. Any law inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid. Next, ensures the government action remain within constitutional limits. Lastly, it supports judicial review and accountability. Next, functions of the Federal Constitution. First, establish the structure of government. Next, protect citizens and liberties. Defines the division of powers between federal and state government. And lastly, maintain justice, order and effective governance. Okay, so state constitution in Malaysia, purpose and legal basis, governs the administration of each Malaysian state, derived from and subject to the federal constitution. Next, structure and key provisions, covers head of state, executive council, state legislative assembly, financial administration. Defines the roles of the Menteri Besar or Chief Minister and state institution. And lastly, its relationship with the federal constitution. State constitution are subordinate to the federal constitution. Next, legislative powers are divided through federal list, state list, concurrent list. And lastly, ensures coordination between federal and state government. Okay, so here is the division of powers between the federal and state governments and federal constitution of Malaysia. State autonomy in Malaysia. State autonomy refers to the authority granted to the state governments under the federal constitution to manage matters within their own jurisdiction.
Now, moving to the similarities between the federal and state government. So in fact, both of the governments are established under the federal constitution and they also must act according to the law. They also have the power to make laws within their own areas of responsibility and each of them has its own administrative system to manage government affairs. Besides that, both governments work together in shared area under the current list. Therefore, although their powers are divided, but both governments play an important role in the governing Malaysia effect. Next, moving to the differences between the federal government and the state government. Referring to the tables above, the federal government has higher authority and it also responsible for national matters such as defences, education, finance and also foreign affairs. On the other hand, the state government manage state matters like land, agriculture and also local government. If there is any conflict between federal and state laws, the federal law should take the priority. For the overall, both of the government has their different responsibilities, but they also work together to ensure the country is governed effectively.
Let's move on to the second topic, which is sort of negligence in Malaysian construction. Based on the case of Hemraj and Co. Sendirian Berhad versus Tenaga Nasional Berhad. The case involved damage to an underground TNB electricity cable during residential excavation works carried out by an independent contractor. The federal court considered whether the property owners could be held liable for the contractor's negligence. This case is significant because it clarifies the duty of care and liability of property owners and contractors in Malaysia construction projects.
Next, we continue to objective of the study. First, to explain the selected provisions under PWD 203A 2010 and PALM 2006. Second, to examine how these provisions are applied in actual construction projects through case studies and interview. And lastly, to identify challenges and recommend good practice in construction contract administration.
For the methodology, this study based on secondary source of information. We refer to the court judgment of Hemraj Co. Sendirian Berhad and TNB, which a legal text box, journal article and online legal database. This source help us to understand the facts, legal issue and the final court decision.
Now we continue to the literature review PWD 2003A 2010. First, standards contract used for government construction project in Malaysia defines the rights, responsibilities and obligations of employers and contractors. It covers execution of works, quality control and supervision, payment and variation, extension of time (EOT), and lastly dispute resolution. Next, requires contractors to comply with laws and ensure public safety. Pump Contract 2006. Standards contract commonly used for private construction projects. Establish contractual relationship between the employer, architect and contractor. It covers contract administration, variation and instruction, payment certification, defects liability, termination and dispute resolution. And lastly, emphasizes the contractor's duty to perform work diligently and comply with regulation. So here is the selected topic, non-delegable duty of care. Based on Hemrich and Co. Sdn Bhd versus Tenaga Nasional Berhad 2022. Normally, an employer is not liable for the negligence of an independent contractor. Exception, liability may arise under a non-delegable duty of care in special of hazardous situations. The court ruled that routine excavation works are not inherently hazardous. Liability should generally be based on ordinary negligence principles. Non-delegable duty applies only when it's fair, just and reasonable.
The case involves a dispute between Hemrich Co. Sdn Bhd and Tenaga Nasional Berhad or TNB. The dispute starts when a cable electrical underground damaged during excavation work carried out by independent contractor. TNB claimed that Hemrich should be responsible for the damage, although the High Court and the Court of Appeal agree with TNB. Federal Court later overturned the decision between the excavation was considered a routine construction activity and not an usually dangerous one. In this case is the doctrine of delegable duty of care. It means that a person may still be legally responsible even the work carried out by independent contractor. However, the Federal Court ruled that the excavation work was a routine construction work activity. Therefore, the liability remains with independent contractor, not Hemrich and Co. Sdn Bhd.
Now moving to the next point, which is the comparison between PWD 203A and PAM 2006. Both of them are two standard construction contract used in Malaysia. PWD is mainly used for government project, while PAM 2006 is commonly used for private sector project. PWD is administered by the superintending officer, while PAM 2006 is administered by the architect. For the overall, PWD 203A provide greater protection to the government, while PAM 2006 offer a more balanced allocation of risk between the employer and the contractor. The choice of contractor is also depends on the type of the project they has been chosen. Moving to the finding of the study case. Based on the study case, the court found that the doctrine of non-delegable duty of care does not apply to every construction activity. In this case, the excavation work was considered as a normal construction activity, so the property owner was not liable for the negligence of the independent contractor. The study also found that proper planning before excavation is very important. Measuring work such as checking underground utility cables and carrying out utilities mapping also can help prevent damage, avoid delays and also reduce legal disputes. So moving to the next section, which is the application for the negligence case. These studies highlight the importance of legal responsibility in the construction industry among property owners, contractor and the project manager. Even when work is done by independent contractors, proper planning and also supervision are very essential to reduce accident and damage to the surrounding, properties and also the public. The study also stresses the need for proper investigation before excavation work, including identifying underground utilities such as pipe and electrical cables to avoid damage and delay. So for the overall, this study is emphasize key construction law principles, especially negligence, and highlight the importance of good planning, construct compliance, and risk management to ensure the project are completed safely and successfully. These are the challenges that we was encountered during this study case. One of the main challenges during this study case was obtaining sufficient and reliable information about the selected case. Beside the court judgment, we had to refer journals and legal references for a better understanding of the case. Other challenges was understanding legal terms, especially the doctrine of non-delegable duty of care, and it required extra time to relate the legal concept to the construction contract. Despite these challenges, the study was successfully completed by referring to the reliable sources such as court judgment, academic journals and also legal database.